Hello to our lovely Resters Entertainment listeners. This is me, Marina Hyde.
And me, Richard Osman. Hello, everybody. Now, if you just can't get enough of Marina and I speaking each week, you must join us on the Resters Entertainment Club if you want more of the same.
Because that's all of our brilliant bonus episodes. Each week we look at some of the most sensational and unbelievable tales from the world of showbiz. So we've done iconic celebrity moments like when Tom Cruise surfed Oprah's sofa, the nightmare of making the box office flop, The Island of Dr. Moreau, which is one of my favourite stories ever. And it's quite an unknown one, that one, in some ways.
It's really, really good. And this week we're concluding our two-part, I was going to say deep dive on Jaws, but you must never do a deep dive on Jaws.
Anyone is still terrified of getting in the water, then this bonus series is perfect for you because we get into the unbelievable details of why it was such a chaotic, it was almost killer production. It was actually an almost killer production.
Robot sharks, my friend Steven Spielberg. What more do you need? I say my friend, I met him once.
Plus, as a Resters Entertainment Club member, you get to listen to both of our regular episodes on Tuesday and completely ad-free. That is a big thing that people say.
Are you serious? Completely ad-free?
Somehow hate us reading the ads.
Join the Resters Entertainment Club today by visiting therestesentertainment.com.
We'll see you there. Hello and welcome to this episode of The Rest is Entertainment with me, Marina Hyde.
And me, Richard Osman. Hi, Marina.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. It's very nice to see you. Listen, everyone, there was going to come a point in this podcast, it was always going to happen, where our attention was going to have to turn to Noel Edmonds.
It was fated.
Yeah, and today is the day. His documentary is out on ITV, so we are going to be chatting a little bit about Noel. What he means.
A documentary about him. I wouldn't necessarily describe it comes off as his documentary, but buckle up, everybody, because we're going in.
We are going in. We're also going to talk about this amazing new world of micro dramas, which is very quickly become a $1 billion industry and a tiny new way of making and watching television, which a lot of people haven't yet heard of, but everyone is about to hear of.
It's totally fascinating, and it's fascinating for the industry, and it's a really interesting thing. So
it's either the best thing that's ever happened or the worst thing that's ever happened.
Yeah, I haven't called it yet.
Yes.
Perhaps when we're talking, I'll make the decision. Okay, shall we get into Noel's Kiwi Adventure?
Yes, shall we?
It's a 3-part documentary about Noel Edmonds, airing on ITV. I would say my top line review of it is bring back Philip Schofield, but let's not get too deeply into that because I think we should, for our younger listeners, you might want to say, who is Noel Edmonds? He sort of bestrode the world of light entertainment for a long while back there.
Many
short
years.
Colossus, very short Colossus.
Yes, he was the Radio 1 breakfast DJ in the 70s. In the early days, the Swap Shop and Breakfast Show and Noel's House Party, he was zany. He would do pranks. The gotchas on House Party.
Yeah.
The
he
gotchas
was a lord
he would
of
do.
misrule.
A lord of misrule, exactly that. And he bestrode Saturday night TV like a colossus. He was the big one. He's as famous as it's possible to be. He was the most famous presenter on television.
He went on that journey, which is, you start on kids' TV, then he went to prime time.
Yeah.
Then there was a hiatus, which we'll talk about, and then he came into your orbit, your direct orbit, didn't he, Richard?
He did so he'd done Late Breakfast Show, Noel's House Party. Yet there had been a few years where we hadn't seen Noel on screen, and then we were looking for a presenter for a show which we were certain wasn't going to work, called Deal or No Deal. He came in, we cast him in that, and he re-entered the public consciousness for lots and lots of reasons. Then again, when that ended, there was another dip, and now we're in the sort of the third act of the Edmonds career.
What he's done, we should say what he's done. Noel Edmonds has moved to New Zealand. He's moved to a place on the South Island called Natimoti, and he's bought 800 acres of land, something like $30 million worth of property, which he's rechristened River Haven. And part of that, there's a business on it, the Bugger Inn, which is a pub. There's a vineyard. Obviously, it being Noel Edmonds, there's a significant spiritual dimension to the estate. There's a crystal room, his house.
There's an energy garden, I think.
They're trying to build an energy garden. And so what we're looking at here really is one of those new life, new business, relocation type of documentaries, right?
A famous person goes to a beautiful place and does something interesting. Is essentially that. It's sort of like, can ITV recreate Clarkson's farm?
Yeah.
Can they do a thing with someone who everybody knows doing something intriguing with a band of people working for him? Civilians working for him. Not everything goes to plan, and not everything that doesn't go to plan is included in the documentary either. I think it's fair to say there's quite a long backstory before this documentary starts about his life in New Zealand.
Yes, I think there is. If you see this place, by the way, it's so beautiful.
So beautiful.
It's really like it is Middle Earth, but it's the Shire bit of Middle Earth rather than any of the sites of the great battles in Lord of the Rings. But you are praying for orcs throughout. I was anyway. He is quite insufferable, and we'll dive deep. It's a psychiatric portrait of him as much as anything else, but. And actually, I did think, all those tech bros have got those bunkers in New Zealand, and you do think, oh, it's so annoying, because it's them who will cause the apocalypse. You know it with some quantum computing error.
And they'll get to go to somewhere beautiful.
They'll get to go and fly there. But I feel so much better about that now that I know that Noel Edmonds will be waiting for them. So there will be a hell of sorts awaiting them. So I feel a lot more relaxed about the apocalypse and their exit strategy for it. But anyway, let's continue. So, why
does he go to New Zealand in the first place? Is a very interesting and disputed thing as well. So Noel, after Deal or No Deal came off air on Channel 4, it had a long run and a very, very, very successful run. It got to the point where it was too expensive for the ratings it was getting, as with all shows. Noel had a few attempts to reinvent himself. He did Noel's HQ on Sky, which is an extraordinary
I really want to talk about that
watch
later.
He did Cheap, Cheap, Cheap on Channel 4, which is one of the most extraordinary game shows in history, with him and a series of young improvisers.
And for you to say that means something.
It's amazing. It's got like Keel Smith-Bino, who now we know from Ghosts and loads of things. Yeah. He's sort of a sidekick on there, and I've spoken to people who were on that production, and it was quite a ride. I think this is your
Watergate, this particular item, I have to say.
You know what?
To a lot of people on a lot of productions.
My favourite thing about doing this podcast is I get to think about things, so I love it. We decide what we're going to talk about. I could spend a few days think about what I think about stuff, talking to people. This is the most intense one I've had to do, I have to say, talking to people.
You're too close to it.
Yes, I am too close to it, and I have a lot of opinions, which I will get onto. Spoiler alert, I retain a fondness for Noel. Okay. So we will get to that. So he did Cheap, Cheap, Cheap. Again, that didn't trouble the scorers particularly. Then he goes on I'm a Celebrity. This is the big sort of roll of the dice. Goes on I'm a Celebrity, goes in late, gets not deliberately late.
He was the highest paid celeb on ever at that time. He got about 600 grand, and he's been beaten by people like Colleen since, but he was the biggest one at the time.
600 grand, goes in, is made emperor of the camp, gets voted out first. And it's not even we vote out the person we like least. You vote for your most popular person. He got the least votes.
Yeah.
And I think, like for anyone, that would be harmful to one's ego. I think after that, there were various talks about maybe he could do a show with Harry Redknapp, because there was a relationship they sort of had in camp. None of it comes off. He then, and it may be coincidence, the next year decides he's going to emigrate to New Zealand.
We should say that before all this is, and the reason that we're kind of weaving in all these kind of looking forwards and backwards parts to this story is because he epitomises so many particular things I think about British light entertainment, and that's why he's interesting in other ways to talk about. There was that incredible bitterness about leaving the BBC originally before he even did Deal or No Deal, and there are a lot of people who were like that, but he, I think, went further and further than criticising anyone. There was a point where he was even saying, "I'm working with a consortium when we're going to buy the BBC."
We're going to buy the BBC.
How are you doing that?
Where do you begin? He said, "I no longer pay my license fee because that we're no longer represented," and people said to the BBC, "Surely you should prosecute him," and they said, "Oh no, we've checked our records. He does pay his license fee."
But I can't stand all these guys. There's so many of these guys who had, and by the way, were all men, who had these incredible sort of 30-year careers in prime time or whatever it was, and when eventually they have to bring some new people through, instead of thinking, "Thank you very much, you made me very rich doing what I loved," they are, not to sound like J.D. Vance, they're so bitter, but, did you even say thank you? Did you even say thank you, Noel? But he was so angry about being sort of let go, as he put it, by the BBC. No, they just didn't give you another decade's worth of primetime show. Yeah. And I find that bitterness is a huge part of the character. And you see it a lot in this documentary, despite the fact his relentless insistence that he is only about positivity. There is such a sort of Partridgian, if I may use that, which is why Alan Partridge, we'll have to talk about him as well, is such a brilliant archetype. There is such a level of bitterness that he cannot expunge.
There's such a, needless to say, I had the last laugh.
Yeah.
energy going on. Noel's great tragedy, I think, is that he's actually incredibly talented. That's the big problem. And most of the people in his generation were not. And I have to say, of all the presenters I have ever worked with, he is head and shoulders the best. He's as close as you would say to a genius in light entertainment presenting. He just is. He's unbelievable. And when you are a producer and you see a presenter who can produce on the floor and can make something out of nothing, you have to admire it. He's brilliant. He's brilliant at what he did. He was brilliant on Swap Shop. He was brilliant on Noel's House Party. He was brilliant on the Radio 1 Breakfast Show. He was brilliant on Deal or No Deal. The first time we ever did a run through, walks straight into this thing, just absolutely hit the ground running, nailed it throughout series after series of Deal or No Deal. He did a genuinely unbelievable job. Like, he's incredibly good.
How do you think he fares in the documentary format, which of course is different to being the presenter of a light entertainment format?
Well, the interesting thing about being the presenter or a producer of a light entertainment format is it's actually rather useful if you like to control your environment, if you like to control a narrative, if you are able to see what's coming and channel it in a certain direction. That's the real skill.
He's one of the most, I think, watching this documentary, he's one of the most controlling people you can possibly imagine, outside of people like magicians and, in my view, butchers, but that's just it.
Butchers?
Yeah. I think there's a level of control there that I find quite interesting.
Gosh, I wish we weren't talking about Noel, because I'd like to explore that.
Well, that's one for a future podcast.
I don't think we're going to have time.
Anyhow.
But his brilliance at being a TV presenter is that ability to control his surroundings, to be a ringmaster. In the same way that a circus runs if you have an amazing ringmaster, right? That's how a TV format runs. And you know you've got to get from A all the way through to Z, and he will take you there in just a brilliant way and make it a better show than it would have been before. He's brilliant at it. That skill is not useful in daily life. That skill is an incredibly bad one to have in daily life, the ability to control your environment and be a ringmaster for your environment. It's great for you, of course it is, because you can avoid pain, you can avoid vulnerability, you can avoid anything inconvenient. It's not brilliant for people around you because in the real world there's a thing called truth. And if you are always controlling your environment, then truth tends to bump up against you. And I've always felt with Noel that his life would be so easy if he just accepted who he was, what he does, the skills that he have, which are many and varied. I've seen him being enormously generous to an enormous amount of people. He has inside him such a kindness and such a skill that his life should be the easiest life that anyone has ever had, because he's really good at what he does, and the thing that he does is really, really lucrative. You can get paid an awful lot. But at some point,
he keeps reminding us.
As he keeps reminding us. But this documentary is interesting because you see that out in the real world.
Well, you see him trying, actually what I think, not to get too meta about it, you see him trying to control the documentary.
Yeah.
That lots of things happen in the documentary that you think, this happens slightly sometimes with people who write lifestyle columns, and you think, why are you doing this? Oh, I see, because you're going to get a column out of it. There's a bit where he's found some scientific paper. We'll have to come to the type of science he believes in a minute. But he's found some paper from decades and decades ago that if you play music to plants, they grow better, or whatever it is. Yeah. And so to the vines in the vineyard, he gets a sort of piano on the back of a low loader, and he is going right, and you think, I see why you've done this. What you've done is that you think, oh, well, that will they'll like this for the documentary. And he's trying to control. And actually, all you can think about, because it's very, very difficult to escape the format, all you can think about is, you're doing this for the documentary. Yeah. And he can't control the environment fully. I have to say that the Rob Brydon voiceover is a masterclass.
It's, you know what, I found the documentary very interesting because it doesn't hang him out to dry. It doesn't show him as a figure of fun. It doesn't. It's sort of all things to all people. I thought it walked across a very interesting tightrope.
The gossamer touch of Rob Brydon. That voiceover is really difficult to do when you see when you see the images that you're having and the scenes that you're having to sort of gloss.
And then listen, at the end of the documentary, you'll also see to speak to your point just then. You will see in a documentary like. You don't have a credit. We know what the documentary is. It's about you. And the end it says series consultant and featuring Noel Edmonds is what it says. It doesn't say featuring anyone else. It says series consultant and featuring Noel Edmonds.
He would have fought tooth and nail for that particular credit that no one else would care about.
Yeah. He says at the end, and this is the key to all of it. He says, I hope people will watch this and maybe come out with a different opinion of me. And Noel is always trying to make people have a different opinion of him. That's the thing. I think people disappoint Noel quite a lot. I think that
the collective,
the collective, and individual people and councils and anyone he comes up against tend to disappoint him. Noel has many times in his life been the smartest person in the room. Right? He's very, very, very bright. Noel, he's a very smart guy. But he's not always the smartest person in the room. I think sometimes he lacks the vision to see sometimes. He's always worked brilliantly when he's with a great producer. Okay, so when he's with Michael Hurl in his early bit of his career, Glenn Hugel on Deal or No Deal, people who could, put him up on stuff and make him better. And in the same way that Clarkson's Farm works brilliantly, and all of Clarkson's stuff works brilliantly because he's got Andy Willman with him. And and Clarkson knows that Willman is as smart as him, and his instincts, are razor sharp. And when Noel loses that, and it's just Noel, I think people warm to him less, is the truth. And that's the opposite of what he wants.
But not to know yourself and to accept yourself is the great tragedy of, and actually, weirdly, the great tragedy, particularly of many people, and definitely many people in that particular generation of light entertainment.
Yeah.
And let's just be grateful that he's gone to New Zealand, because a huge number of those people of that generation
still with us,
or they ended up in a panorama. That was their documentary,
and by the way,
or in the files of Operation Yewtree. So there's none of that with Noel Edmonds.
Well, there really isn't any of that with Noel. That is not his issue, and it's interesting because there was a time when he was the most famous person in Britain. Right?
Yeah, and it was a sort of nationalised zaniness, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, but that's heady, and it was a time where culture wasn't quite so atomised. So if you were famous, you were like properly famous, like everybody loved you, and also you didn't really hear about the people who didn't like you in those days. Because when you're going to hear it, people might write into the BBC, but no one's showing you the letters where people don't like you. So you're able to be famous with everyone and only hear nice things about yourself. And that, by the way, is not Noel's fault. And that's the culture in which he is raised. And, whatever his personality type is, that was the thing that it all filtered through. Now, you come back to his comeback on Deal or No Deal and so on, and I think more particularly post Deal or No Deal. We now live in a culture where we don't live in a monoculture. So there's lots and lots of different things to watch. So his fame is not exactly what it was before. So he gets this great fame, and Deal or No Deal is a huge hit and it's a cultural touchstone, but it is never going to be what Noel's House Party is, because we don't live in that world anymore. Also, you get so much more feedback now, and lots of people are saying they don't like you. Because whoever you are, if you're, being watched by half the country, there are millions of people who don't like you. It doesn't matter, you can be David Attenborough, and you go to a pub, you'll find someone who goes, Attenborough, no, not for me. A bit smug, I always think. There will always be people who don't like you. And if you've grown up in an environment where none of that touches you, I think it can be very difficult, and I think it can knock you off course if you're someone who's prone to being knocked off course.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you're someone who needs to
brittle and obsessive.
Listen, your words, not mine. If you are someone who needs to control the emotions of people around you, it is a difficult culture to live in now, because you can't do that. It is impossible, and it was possible to do that in the 70s and 80s. Now you cannot, and there are certain characters who that could send mad.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the features of the property, River Haven.
Yes,
the bugger in, obviously. I mean, he's desperately trying to sort of assert parity.
Yeah.
So there's a point where he says, I quite fancy the bugger in taking on Diddley Squat in a pub quiz.
Yeah.
We'd wipe them out, and you just think, oh, no. It's so obvious.
I know.
I mean, it's so... No voiceover from Rob Brydon at that point, because you don't need to say anything.
Yeah. The beers are called things like Tits Up and Old Git.
Well, Noel Edmonds is very much one of those people who still uses the phrase with the word methinks, which, come my revolution, as you know, will see you immediately shot, not even against a wall. Out across the property, he's got various things. Now, probably the most notable is Guardian. Now, one of the things we didn't mention is that Noel had a long battle with Lloyds over some sort of financial impropriety. I think, listen, I'll leave it to him to tell the story. But if you do want to find out the story, he's mounted it on a sort of weatherproof plinth behind the vast statue of a knight, which he calls Guardian, who is on the property. And he says, it's become a place of pilgrimage for local people for all the right reasons. Again, there's no one there when the cameras are there, but I make no comment. Now, this is a very, very big statue of a sort of kneeling knight, Guardian. It's made by the prop studio who did lots of things for Avatar and Lord of the Rings, obviously. That's just one of the very, very odd things that's there. I have to say, your always dying for Liz, his wife, to come on screen. They met as a makeup artist. All the clocks are set to something like 11:06 in the house.
The moment they met.
The moment they met. You know, they've got all the kind of ridiculous, boring cliches, the live, laugh, loves, and the only positivity here, and these sort of signs around the house.
Which are always, by the way, red flags. If you're in any company and you walk into any executive's office and they have only positivity here, because you know they're the person who's
You'll be giving your P45 in about 3 seconds.
They are going to be the person who makes your life a nightmare.
Anyway, but he says, as you can see, our messaging is very clear. I mean, who talks about interiors in this way? As you can see, my messaging is very clear. We have to quickly just get into the whole grasp of science. He's got a very, very distinct new age, I don't know, whatever you would want to call it. It's a bit like Dave St. Hubbins in Spinal Tap. All sorts of bits of Eastern philosophy have drifted across this transom. He gave a number of interviews and he said things like, you know, I see my parents, they're all the time, they're two balls of light that follow me around. He was clearly imbibing a huge amount of
He talked about cosmic ordering, which is you ask the universe for something and it delivers. And he said, oh, you know what? And actually it delivered Deal or No Deal to me. And this is why, listen, people, feel free to believe in cosmic ordering. But the reason Noel got Deal or No Deal is not cosmic ordering. It's the fact that he was massively famous. He auditioned to do Countdown on Channel 4. And Kevin Ligo, who was head of Channel 4 at the time, said, I'm not sure he's quite right for that, you know, but is there something else? So we said, look, we've got this thing, Deal or No Deal, so maybe we'll try him. He came in and he was brilliant at it. And that's why he got it. No other, he didn't call it into being. It could have been someone else's show. He was just ready at that point.
You have no idea what a pawn of the planets you are, Richard. And I'm afraid you were being manipulated by forces far, far beyond your ken. But anyhow, I will say that he of course, like many people, believes in reincarnation. He can't actually quite deal with the fact that one of the other people who works for him on the estate also believes in reincarnation, and he's a bit worried that the guy might be slightly senior to him in the past life in which they previously met. And Noel really has spent quite a long time trying to discover his rank, but in a very sort of trying to be really relaxed about it and failing. He keeps trying to say, I've got a bit of a power complex. Don't worry, you don't need to say. Liz is hilarious. Liz says she's talking about the frequencies that they have on these kind of, they've got a crystal room and all these sort of things. She says they're apparently healing frequencies. Now, if you listen very carefully, I rewound that clip about 6 times, I think you can hear a slight parenthesis around apparently. That's a frequency that only the cynical ear can hear. But Noel doesn't hear it, I don't think.
In the same way that he is incredibly talented as a TV presenter, and that you just think, just do that. He looks unbelievable for 76 years old.
He does look good.
I mean, he looks incredible.
The hair's ridiculous. You haven't seen that. The hair has never changed.
No.
And I don't know how he gets the lift in it and the crystal tips and all of it. I mean, you know, he'll tell you that he drinks only structured water, which makes a little vortex in the water, and then he says it doesn't have to go through your kidneys or liver. Very interesting.
Oh, really?
There's a bit where he's got two rafts that he wants to do whitewater rafting down his local river. He's trying to explain to the guy, his sort of head groundsman or wherever he is, there's all these people who have to work for him and just absorb it all. When we took out the uninflated raft, it was so much heavier, and now it's so much lighter. Do you know why that is? And the guy just doesn't say, well, I mean, you know, because obviously when you carry something like this, it's much more dense, and then it's now the larger surface area, so it feels lighter. It's actually, Richard, scientifically, it's actually something to do with the weight of our spirit and the weight of air. And therefore, when we die, our bodies become much lighter. And that actually is the lesson of that raft inflation. You couldn't possibly argue with him about any of these things.
There's certain things that are unarguable because they're true, and there's certain things that are unarguable because you're like, well, where do I begin to argue with that? There isn't. I can't even start. And he likes those things.
He likes to have the esoteric information that he can then impart, which is another form of controlling behaviour, I think.
Yeah, and listen, he wants his Caleb and you know the kind of stars of Clarkson's Farm. You know, you could see him all the time trying to promote various members of his staff, but he can't let their personality be the thing. No. It has to be his version of their personality. It has to sort of be filtered through him.
Well, they're all his straight men, his foil.
Yeah,
they're given these tiny walk-ons in scenes where the message is always a kind of sledgehammer. Noel is wacky. Noel has so many ideas. How are we going to do all Noel's amazing ideas? But you know what? He's a genius and he has vision. And you know, anyway.
How many years? That's the problem.
I wouldn't say at estate management, but.
Yes,
perhaps in light entertainment formats.
I'm not qualified to say.
In that way, I really felt like he epitomises that life. You know, like it's like egg, larvae, pupa, moth. It is, isn't it? It's like kids' TV, prime time, bitterness, ironic documentary subject.
Yeah.
That is actually, well, that's one of the light entertainment lifestyles. We've discussed the U-Tree version earlier, but there is a darkness to those people. There is a darkness to some of those men. Not the darkness that we keep alluding to, but there is a sort of weirdness. There's something about it.
Listen, all of us in our 20s and 30s have something wrong with us. By and large, we'll address
I still have
that.
loads of things wrong with me.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll have the big thing that comes from our childhood or whatever it is, and we'll either go to therapy or we'll marry someone who understands us and sorts it out for us. Or, you go through things and you sort it out because life becomes unlivable after a certain point if you are difficult. Whereas if you have been as famous as that generation of presenters were, same with rock stars, there is nobody to pick you up on your bullshit. No one's going to do it. And this is not to say that these people are uniquely bullshitting. They're not. Everyone has bullshit. Most people have it picked up on at some point. But if you are a rock star or if you're a TV presenter of the 80s or if you're a tech bro now, you are surrounded by people who do not pick you up on your bullshit. It doesn't happen. And if that lasts through to your 50s, it's slightly too late, actually, to become the person you were supposed to be. So you're stuck with this character who you were when you were 23, probably, and you never did the work on yourself. You were never able to be called out on it to the extent where you go, actually, do you know what? That's right. I'm going to become a real boy now. You are forever stuck in the person you were in your 20s. And if you are that person, but you find yourself in 2025, it's really, really difficult because what do you do? Because it's an entirely different world and you keep butting up against reality and either you are wrong or reality is wrong. Only one of those two things can be right. And
well, I know which is wrong in Noel's case.
Well, if you've gone through your whole life knowing for a fact that you are not wrong, then of course it's reality that's wrong. And of course, you start looking at, all sorts of different things that would make sense of the gap between you and reality that seems to have opened up. So I'm not saying that about Noel necessarily, but I'm saying that about that generation. If you're the same person you were 30 years ago, the world is a very odd place. And the way that you deal with that comes out in your personality.
I agree. And I do think it's really weird. I think I was talking to Chris Morris about this. He hit on something with that Noel's HQ show, which was this very weird show he did on Sky.
Amazing.
It was genuinely 2008 to 2009. It seemed completely bizarre. He was railing against, I don't know, I suppose to some extent he was railing against elites. And elites could even be members of the local council. He was railing against a world that didn't work, a form of broken Britain, okay?
Yeah.
And it seemed to kind of liberals like me in our ivory tower, like, this is so ridiculous. But he was attuned to something that, in fact, completely defined the next decade certainly from 2016 onwards, when we became powerfully aware that actually maybe Noel's HQ wasn't such a nutty show after all. But it was really early. I mean, it's a long time ago, actually. Yeah. And it's so mad. But you honestly now you look at it and it could have been made yesterday. It's very, very 2025. It's very light, lots of those kind of things that have become very successful, GB News, all of those sort of things, people railing in quite a lo-fi environment about a world that doesn't work anymore. And actually, he was ahead of his time on that, I have to say.
I mean, listen, he has, as we've discussed, he has much to commend him. I would really recommend watching this documentary. It's really well made. It's really entertaining, however you want to take it. If you like him, it's entertaining. If you're not a fan of him, it's entertaining. There's stuff to be taken away. But, he, as you say, he keeps telling you who he is, which you were able to do in the 70s and 80s. You were able to say, this is me, this is my brand, this is what I do, this is how it's controlled. And you were able to be that. You can't be that anymore. You cannot tell people who you are. You have to show people who you are. Yeah. And so Noel is telling you who he is all the way through this documentary. But what he's really doing, of course, is showing you who he is. It's up to you as a viewer to decide who you think that is. He wants you to see him differently. You may well do after this documentary one way or another. But that's the central thing of it, is we watch television very differently now. We will make our own mind up. And the more you try and tell us what the truth is, the more we think, well, I wonder if there's something behind that. I genuinely found it fascinating. And I do, as I say, I've thought a lot about this over the last few days because, I worked with Noel for a while. Glenn Hugott and Richard Haigh did most of the Deal or No Deal, but I was there at the beginning. And he was extraordinarily brilliant, great in meetings, just a fascinating human being in many, many ways. And as I say, I do retain a fondness for him. And he made that show a bigger hit than it would have been if we hadn't had him. But being a great light entertainment television presenter, it's not really anything. it's lovely to be able to do it, and it's lucrative and it's great and it brings joy to millions. Being right about how to present a TV show and being right about how a TV show makes people feel does not mean you're going to be right about other things as well. In the same way that you can build an electric car company or a space company and not be right about how democracy should run. Skills are not necessarily transferable. So in my world, the world that I'm from, that I'm very, very protective of, the world of light entertainment and the world of bringing that entertainment into homes, I genuinely will always have my absolute admiration and respect. He always will do. This, I do think, you have to take him at his word and say, see what you think of me. And it's an amazing character piece, this documentary. You will definitely have thoughts after watching it, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And there are so many things that have changed how we see television in that way, actually. And I think obviously things like the documentaries of Louis Theroux, which ushered in that sort of need for people to show themselves and not tell themselves anymore. But also it's so extraordinary. The creation of Alan Partridge is one of the most it is so prescient that Alan Partridge, obviously, who sort of has this brief firework of a light entertainment career, and then we just sort of exist in his bitterness for the last few decades, which I love. He struck so clearly on something about those guys.
Yeah, he was very much based on the Noel Edmonds generation, definitely, and people who are less successful than Noel, but you can see bits of all of them in there.
It's really completely fascinating how that particular streak of bitterness and that particular kind of way of talking about a lost country and all sorts of things. Partridge epitomised those things sort of before they happened or before you picked up on them. Yeah. In lots of ways that he satirised the future. And so as these people have become more and more, as I say, moving in that life cycle from moving away from prime time, and then they have their bitter period where they keep telling the newspapers this or that. And then they become subject of these ironic or otherwise documentaries with that ironic distance.
Yes.
Then
this felt post-ironic, this documentary.
Yes, I think so.
Like
you just had to point the camera at him.
Yes, you just point the camera. I think the programme makers were quite bright. They just went, we don't need to over-egg anything here.
It's very light-touched, and you can see, yes.
Can I say one other thing about Partridge, though? Yeah. Is one of the reasons we love Partridge so much is you also feel for him. You also see where it comes from. So you see him being nasty to people around him, all of that, but there's a bit of you that slightly roots for him because you see what he wants. You can see the thing that he needs, which is somebody to love him. You can just, you see it.
Do you know, at the time, I remember when The Office came out, I remember someone telling me that Stephen Coogan had said, "Is it such an amazing creation, David Brent? David Brent you'd have a pint with, whereas Partridge you wouldn't." Partridge has mellowed. He stayed with us because there's something about him that is slightly tragic tenor, despite Noel Edmonds' kind of relentlessly upbeat, supposedly positive and kind of zany persona. There is something that's, as you say, very sort of Shakespearean about it all.
It really is. I really recommend it. It's if you're not interested in Noel, do not watch it.
Oh, no. By the way, my children have no idea who on earth he was.
Oh, yeah.
Of course they do. They were like, who? I mean, they were totally scathing about him. Totally. They didn't know who he was at all, because obviously they haven't watched any of those things. Yeah. They were born after he was off air, and most of them, but they were completely transfixed by the character.
There's only one currency these days, and that's authenticity. It is the only currency. And in the old days, in the 80s, you were able to fake authenticity, and you no longer can, or if you can, it's very, very, very hard to fake authenticity. Just be yourself, and if you're young enough to change, be yourself, and if you're not, then at least know, at least kind of think maybe this isn't me. I don't know. Whenever you meet with anyone who's involved in that world, all they want is stories about that generation of presenters. And by the way, some of the best stories in the world are Noel Edmonds stories, and they're not horrible stories, but they're just stories where you're just going, "You are kidding me? That's unbelievable," because he came from that era where he was so famous and the world was at his feet, and so mad stuff happened all the time. Whenever you tell any of those anecdotes, the Coogans of this world are listening, I think.
When I was writing on the Guardian's diary column, we used to sort of made him a bit of a character, because he was constantly, this was in his real, because it was in his real bitter phase, and he would get people to come and do an interview with him, and he'd be so proud about the fact that he had the largest estate in England at the time without any public right of way through it. And I can't quite remember why I had to end up taking him out to dinner, but we went to
this is new information.
Ended up having to take him out to dinner. We went to the Woolsey, And it went on a bit, I must say. And then, do you know, it was so funny, Richard, because when I got home, he rang me on my home number quite a few times. It was after midnight, but I didn't pick up. I don't know, perhaps I'd accidentally picked up something from the table, or he'd left something. I couldn't put my finger on it. Very strange. Anyway, those were in the years where he was searching for something, perhaps.
Oh, by the way, you know our argument about whether Interior Design Masters was better than Citizen Kane? I was chatting to Glenn Hugel, who was the other genius behind Deal on a Deal, the two of them. He was talking about there's an amazing episode where Noel was asking people's advice about what the person should do. That's the beauty of that show. You could sort of jump up and down and it could take the weight. And then he decides literally just on a whim to go outside of the studio, walk out, go up onto the main road, stop a car, get in a car while the Steadicam's still with him. And Glenn was saying, that's what I loved working with him. He said, that's the closest I think I've ever been to making either Citizen Kane or Interior Design Masters.
Very good.
After the break, micro-dramas.
Micro-dramas.
They're going to change the world as we know it.
Okay, very good. This episode is brought to you by Sky Cinema, the ultimate destination for movie lovers to enjoy the latest blockbusters, with Paramount Plus included at no extra cost.
Now, Anora, this year's Best Picture winner at the Oscars, has just landed on Sky Cinema. If you haven't seen it, it follows a Brooklyn dancer, a Russian oligarch family, and a Cold War with the in-laws. It's sharp, it's stylish, with 5 Oscars to prove it.
Add Twisters and Wild Robot to the mix, and Sky Cinema doesn't just offer films, it premieres them straight to your living room.
Paramount Plus, as Marina said, included with your subscription at no extra cost, bringing you blockbuster movies, new originals, and hit shows. The full series of Mobland is available to stream now, as well as exclusive blockbusters like Gladiator 2, that's on there.
Plus, enjoy hit series like Lionesses and Landman, which I love, exclusively on Paramount Plus. One subscription, and suddenly you're choosing between togas, turf wars, and tornadoes.
Search Sky Cinema to find out more. Paramount Plus Basic, with ads included for Sky TV customers, with Sky Cinema only. We talked for quite a long time about Noel Edmonds. For people who don't know him, I'm so sorry, but it
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
My children loved it, and you don't have to know him. You know the type.
Now, let's talk about micro-dramas. Now, what these are, they started in China, and they're essentially, they're sort of films, but they're cut into 1-minute chunks. So they are 1 minute long episodic dramas. They're often called vertical dramas as well as microdramas because they are made to watch on your phone. They're literally made to watch with your phone held
and you don't
vertically.
turn your phone horizontal to watch. So you can only fit about 1 or 2 people in any frame.
Exactly.
Which is quite sort of the aesthetic.
The episodes are 1 minute long, sometimes up to 3 minutes long, but usually a minute and a half. They all end with a cliffhanger. And as I say, there's about 55, 60, 70 episodes in each one. You watch the first few for free, and then if you are hooked, you then start either paying for them by watching adverts and earning coins, or you physically pay for them. Yeah. So that's the business model, is these incredibly hooky and cliffhanger-heavy dramas, usually about werewolves or secret billionaires or
they're very
all of these things. Very soapy.
If you want to see some, by the way, there are platforms like
Real Short would be the biggest
Real
one.
Short would be a big one, and you can easily just download it and watch hundreds of.
And
these.
you can watch the first couple. You don't have to pay at all, but you'll get the vibe of what they are. They started in China not that long ago. Within 4 or 5 years, they were worth more than the entire cinema box office of China. Yeah. Within a few years, $6.8 billion a year were being made by these microdramas.
Hollywood, California takes $9 billion, ideally, at the box office to retain its status as anything like the business it is now. It didn't manage to get all the way there. And if it doesn't, that industry contracts a lot. That gives you a sense of the scale of these things.
Absolutely enormous. Very hooky, very, very addictive, very schlocky. But again, that thing we've often said, give people what they want. So this is enormous in China and had stayed pretty much in China. The Chinese government then cracked down on it because they felt that there was a vulgarity to some of them. They liked the ones that were about ancient myths and all of those things, but other ones they felt they didn't like so much. So these companies started looking to the States, started looking abroad essentially for their revenue, and so Real Short was begun. And it's backed. It sounds like a plucky young startup, but it's backed by Baidu and Tencent, two of the biggest companies in China. It's already worth billions. real short.
In America, yeah.
In America. So now we have all these American ones. There's people from Hollywood working on these things, people on their way up, people on their way down who are making these things. There are lots of in-program purchases as well. You can
in-app purchases is a big part of how they make the money.
And you can there's an episode. There's
Real
one,
Short alone made $1 billion.
Yes, Real Short alone made $1 billion.
Year.
So KFC have made their own one, for example, about an ancient empress looking for a chicken leg in her kitchen and suddenly being transported into the modern world. And
that's some of the high end of these dramas.
And finding KFC. But the interesting thing in America, firstly, the growth is exponential. It's massive. But they discovered that the spend on in-app purchases in America is 6 times what it was in China. Not only are they getting millions upon millions of people watching these things, those people are also spending an awful lot of money. So suddenly we have this thing, this entirely new medium is the truth, which is being unbelievably successful.
They do remind me of some things slightly, okay? I'll tell you the things that I think they have a bloodline from. Yes. And this, I don't know whether other people say this.
They're a cross, by the way. I would say it's a cross, just to sum it up, it's a cross between Netflix and TikTok. Yeah. So it's taken the shortness of TikTok, taken the narrative arc of a Netflix and multiplying them together, and it's really, really, really worked, and is coming to a screen near you soon.
In South Korea, they had those webtoons, they had those mobile series, and a lot of people made those because they wanted to get bought and then made which has happened with lots of the big K-dramas have started as a webtoon. Many of them have a sort of moral message. Yeah. There's a guy on YouTube, I don't know if you know him, called Darman, and he does these, we're not just telling stories, we're changing lives. Yeah. And he has these sort of trite little sort of homilies, like mean girls shame a girl for her looks, or, mother smashes up child's PlayStation for gaming too much. And they all have a little moral message. They slightly remind me of that. The acting is sort of terrible, and funny enough, I've watched so many of these now, and I've never dived in and gone for all the way and paid. So I've watched lots of the starts of them, but it was really interesting. I saw so many actors, and I was then Googling to see if that was in fact the girl who was the best friend on Californication and whatever it was, and it was.
Well, because there's no work around, and suddenly there's work.
And I actually spoke to someone this weekend because I knew we were going to talk about this, and someone who said, I just don't want you to say that I've done this. They live in LA, there is no work, and they have done lighting on lots of these. They were telling me about what it's like to shoot one. Often the directors just really don't know what they're doing, but there's lots of seasoned crew. There's also lots of really enthusiastic film school graduates, because remember, these Californian places are still producing huge numbers of people who in the old days were almost doing a vocational degree and would end up going straight into the industry.
And now they're going straight. No, well, literally, there's a job there. Why wouldn't you go here? This Real Short has got enormous studios. They're pumping out a huge amount of content. They need a huge amount of people, and as you say, it tends to be people who are finding it hard to get work on traditional things, plus film school graduates, and they do.
It's totally non-union.
Yes, which I've never quite understood how they get away with that. But
you can. It's a different form of. It's non-union on YouTube. It's lots of people have complained about that in America and said that for all sorts of different reasons, from safeguarding to the fact that the unions are very powerful, but then they're becoming less and less powerful because they don't have any kind of aegis over any of these areas. These new areas anyhow. But this person was saying to me, if you're shooting sort of high-end drama, you're not doing very many pages a day at all.
Well, they can do 55 episodes in 4 days. Yeah. I mean they absolutely,
they've just absolutely nailed it. Yeah, they do like minimum 20 pages a day, and they really burn through it. People don't want to say that they're doing it. First of all, it's non-union. I mean, I think they're awful at the moment, and I just have to say that if you go and watch these, you'll be like, oh my God, this is truly sort of dreadful. It's so hard. Yeah, it's the end of civilization.
But I wonder if you're about to say what I think.
Yeah. Does it? Why should it be? That's just someone hasn't made good ones yet.
I think it's for a creative, and loads and loads of creatives listen to this on both sides of the camera. If someone says to you, look, it's 1 minute episodes and there's 55 of them. Yeah.
Go away and think about it.
Hold on. Okay.
I can see the potential there. Brilliant people can do something brilliant with anything. And, we said before once on this podcast when we were talking about public service broadcasting, we've got this thing in our mind that public service broadcasting has to be sort of delivered in 1 hour shows or half-hour shows. Why? Why does it have to be? Why can't the BBC start making these? Why can't all sorts of people start making these? Well, the first of all, it's great because the barrier to I like anything now where the barrier to kind of from where you think of it to where you can view it
is very short,
because everything else that people are watching, you can do it and put it up the next day. You can be really agile with this. Yeah. It's interesting. I saw that there was one, I haven't watched this one by the way, There's one that's clearly based on, I just read about this, based on the Luigi Mangione story. I mean, imagine how long television would take to do the Luigi Mangione drama. Like, see you in the 2030s. It would take a really long time. And so there is something about that allows maybe traditional broadcasters to respond in that agile way, because everything else they're dealing with, like we said before on sketch shows, how can you compete with a sketch show when you've got someone who can just do a really funny sketch about that day's news and put it on TikTok? And that's where all of the stuff is.
By the way, some of the names of them. My Beautiful Maid is a Spy, The Double Life of My Billionaire Husband, I Married a Millionaire Stranger, Married to My Boss's Enemy, Fake Husband, Real Feelings. There's like, They
sound like YouTube titles. I have to say, they sound like the titles of YouTube videos or TikTok videos or anything like that, but particularly YouTube videos.
The CEO Who Becomes My Secretary.
Yeah.
And
or Mills and Boons, actually.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, at the moment, it's about 74% female skewing in terms of people who are watching these.
Well, it's got ties with that romantasy, hasn't it?
Exactly, and are paying for them. And, romantasy has absolutely saved publishing. Mm-hmm. This is saving, content. But Joey Gia and lots of other people in this space are going, I don't see why we wouldn't start making things that are more male skewing. I don't see, if we think certain things are male and female skewing, which of course some things are, we could make more thrillers and, war films and all this kind of stuff. That's what they want to do. They have got so big, Real Short, so quickly. The app, it was outselling TikTok at one point, the Real Short app. We have people coming into the industry who are going to expect different economics from that industry. You would hope we would get to the point with this where the budgets are going up, and certainly The Double Life of My Billionaire Husband is like $300,000 for a film length thing, but that's more than you're paying $50,000 for some of these Chinese ones. So if budgets can go up, I think creators will be very interested in
because at the moment the scripts are basically like porn scripts. I mean, they're that bad.
Yeah. Well, people have said,
and the acting's terrible.
Yeah, people have said, is it AI?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are AI elements to
it.
Yeah.
Is this writing AI? And Joey Gia says, in Real Short, we have in-house editors, we have in-house writers, and I'm absolutely sure that's right. I will say this: you could do it with AI. If
this hasn't been done with AI, shame on those humans.
One thing that AI can do is give you 55 cliffhangers in a row. That's the thing that it can do. It can't give you heart and emotion and interesting, long form stories and stuff that really, really makes you weep. But it can tell you what a cliffhanger is, and it can do 55 of them in a row for you. So as I say, I'm sure they're not using AI, but they could. I watched a few ages ago, and I've been interested in it getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But I was interested in a kind of, oh my God, is this the fall of civilization? When you watch a few, you're not hooked into the stories particularly. You are definitely hooked into the medium.
Yeah, but like early cinema is crap as well. So it's just it becomes an art form.
Yeah. So it's microdramas, vertical dramas. They'll probably come up with a slightly better name for it at some point.
Yeah, they need a better drama.
But it is definitively not going away. And I do think it's going to be an interesting world for younger creators or even older creators who are thinking, the gatekeepers have sort of shut the gates. Here's a place without gatekeepers. Here's stuff where I can get this funded, and I can prove, I can do proof of concept really, really easily, and I can make these episodes. And after 10, when we start charging, I will see if it's good, because people will tell me if it's good, because they will pay for it immediately. That is the dream for all creatives. The dream for all creatives always is the shortest possible line between the idea being in your head and somebody else seeing it.
Yeah,
that's always the dream, and this feels like a world in which it's possible. I think the romanticities will always win out, but it feels like there is a market there and there's a creative opportunity there, and if the two of those things come together, it might be quite an exciting world, the world of microdramas. Now, I think, because we were talking beforehand, we have the same recommendation this week.
We do. I think we're both going to recommend Shifty, which is the new series of Adam Curtis films, which has gone straight onto iPlayer at the weekend. And it's absolutely fascinating and brilliant in the way that all his films are. But it's really interesting. It's a sort of, I suppose, social history of what it's felt like to live through the last 40 years in Britain, and the huge shifts that have happened to do with power and money.
But done through archive, done just through archive, so you'll be moving from something political to like incredible music to just the quirkiest thing, like clips you've never seen before from certain places, just tell you a story about Britain, and it's mesmeric. And so we in fact both loved it so much. So he's going to come in and speak to us on our Q&A on Thursday.
And
we're doing our first ever interview.
Yes, we are. He's very easy to talk to.
Oh my God, we're going to be so bad at that.
Yeah, we'll be really terrible. But luckily, he is very good at talking. Okay, so please join us for that. And otherwise, we will see you as always on Thursday.
See you on Thursday.